A doctor named Jamie performs his daily routine of getting ready and commuting to work. He performs surgery on an 8-year-old boy. The parents thank him profusely, because he is confident the child will make a full recovery. They offer him anything in return for how much he's helped their family. He goes on the rooftop for a smoke break as the sun rises, where he listens to a voicemail from his son, Marcos. About their scheduled run when he gets off work, he makes the commute home, narrowly missing pedestrians in a crosswalk. On the run with Marcos, he asks for an update on his sister, Sarah, because he hasn't heard from her in a while. He pleads with Marcos to stop running for a minute. Clearly worn out, Jamie blames a cramp in his shoes, but his son blames his smoking habit. He tells him he quit, but his son proves him a liar because someone told him he still goes out on the roof to smoke. Marcos tries to keep going, but he begs him to wait a minute, so his son teases him for getting old and having poor arch support in his shoes. When they arrive back at home, Jamie sits at the kitchen table and tells his wife they need to buy Marcos a hybrid car because he's old enough and worthy of the responsibility. His wife tells him that Sarah got second place in a photography contest, and it's clear he misses talking to her. The busyness of his career has greatly limited his family time. Since she's in her room, he decides to pay her a visit. She says she has to go to class, but agrees to show her dad the pictures she entered in the contest. He's speechless, telling her they're very artistic. He sees a picture of her and her friends, recognizing one of them as Andrea, her brother's girlfriend, but then his daughter whips the camera away and rushes off to class. He's left alone before he takes his dinner out of the oven and goes to sleep. His alarm goes off the same way it did yesterday, before his family has returned from their activities. He commutes to work and follows up with his patients, offering a wink at the 8-year-old recovering patient, and he gives him a thumbs up. Before leaving work, the boy's dad approaches him to ask for an update, to which the surgeon responds positively. He tells him he should take his wife home so they can rest, because they'll call with any updates. The father hesitates, and asks if Jamie has children, saying he would know it's impossible for a parent to do nothing. The father arrives home, and his dinner table is empty once again. At work the next day, there's an emergency with the 8-year-old boy, and his parents accuse him of lying to them. The boy is having a seizure, but the doctor believes he faked it, and asks the boy straightforwardly if he wants to go home. The boy hesitates, so he asks if he's being treated badly, and the boy only looks up at him. The doctor is insistent that they file a report on it, even though his coworker thinks he needs to stay out of it because it's someone else's job. A nurse calls for him several times. He tells her to get someone else, but then he sees the panic in her face. He's rushing down hallways until he scrubs his shaking arms to enter the operating room. He sees his son on the table, with a saw buzzing around his head. The doctors have Jamie removed, telling him he can't do anything and needs to leave. As the sun rises, he is a shaking nervous wreck. He peeks in the operating room as they clean up his son's blood, then joins his family in the recovery room where his wife and daughter are crying together. The security footage reveals the last image before a savage beating his son endured from people outside of a venue. His moped was still in the parking lot, but his cell phone and house keys were gone. The investigator asks if they recognize anyone from the video, and the family names 3 friends that they've already interviewed. They recognize his ex-girlfriend Andrea, and the father is surprised to find out they broke up. The woman tells them that Pedro, one of Marcos's friends, has retracted a few statements, but he could just be nervous. Before they leave the police station, Sarah is questioned separately about Marcos's friends and potential drug activity. The father walks around his son's room, looking at every detail. He finds a picture of him and Andrea, and decides to call her. He invites her to come see his son in the hospital, but she hangs up on him. Sarah tells him dinner is ready, but he says he isn't hungry, and leaves. He goes for a very long drive to the scene of the crime and finds his son's blood on the wall behind the nightclub where he was attacked. He returns to the hospital, and is greeted by the owner of the nightclub. He tells him that in light of what happened, he installed a security camera back there and hired a security guard to keep watch. The man offers to pay some of his son's medical expenses, but Jamie declines. After the man says this sucks for both of them, because of his business, he walks away pretty upset. He visits Pedro, the inconsistent friend that was interviewed. He asks him what happened that night, and he gives him his recount. He says that the friends left Marcos there because he saw a girl he liked, and they didn't want to see him get rejected. After the doctor tells him to be honest with him, he admits that he went back to the club a little later and saw him on the ground. He didn't tell the police about it because the perpetrators saw him. He says there were 4 of them. The father urges him to tell the police, but Pedro is scared because they saw his face and one of them recorded the whole beating on his phone. he tells Jamie that the filming attacker had his hair dyed white and works at the gas station nearest to the nightclub. Lying in bed wide awake while his wife sleeps, he decides to drive to the gas station a long drive away. He spots the kid with white hair, who asks him kindly if he needs help. He tells him no, but follows him when he leaves work. He arrives at a hot hangout spot in a parking lot between buildings. He's approached by a man who asks how much his car was. He ignores him, even after he's joined by his friend, and they start picking on him. They call him out of the car and start banging on his window, until he has no choice but to drive away. On his way out, he finds his daughter Sarah with Andrea. He gives them a ride home. On the way to drop off Andrea, father and daughter say nothing to each other. He moves his side mirror to watch Sarah say goodbye to Andrea, and is surprised to see them kiss each other. His daughter notices her dad might have seen her in the mirror. The silence continues on the way home until he asks her what she was doing there. She asks him the same question, and he isn't sure what to say. He tells her it's none of her business, and she tells him she's worried about him because he hasn't cried yet. He speeds the car a little, and she freaks out. The next morning, he lights a cigarette and decides to call the inspector of police. Before he can, a package arrives for Marcos. It's a good pair of running shoes, with a note that says he won't have any excuses now. He goes for a run, and passes the bridge where they stopped because of his cramp. He follows the white-haired attacker once again, this time driving farther. He pulls up next to him at a stop, and as he watches the biker pull away, he makes the decision to get him. His car rams the back of his bike, knocking him to the ground. The kid says he's going to call the police, but before the call connects, Jamie grabs his phone and leaves the scene. He drives far away, searching for a safe place to stop, but continues tapping the screen to keep it unlocked. He searches the attacker's phone until he finds the video. It's hard for him to watch, but he sees his son's face get stomped on several times. He takes the video to the police station, keeping it unlocked the entire time. When he goes through security, he hesitates to put the phone down for even a moment. Even though security still beeps at him, he rushes the phone to the detective on the case. She informs him that the father of the minor he hit with his car filed a complaint against him, and she doesn't have permission to look at the stolen phone for evidence, so it's useless. His wife picks him up, and as she's driving she asks him if Marco suffered. He says yes. In bed once again, Jamie finds it hard to sleep. He goes to speak with Andrea, who is shocked to see him. She tries to walk by him, but he says he saw the video, and that she was there that night. She tries to walk away, but he turns her around and begs her to speak with the police. She tells him she's sorry, and tries to leave again. But he grabs her again and someone named Raul comes over, demanding to know who he is. She tells him it's Marcos's dad, and they need to shut up about it. They speed away, but Jamie recognized the symbol on Raul's jacket as the symbol of the nightclub. He looks at pictures on his son's social media and decides to pay a visit to Juan, the 8-year-old's father. Jamie shows him a picture of his son Marcos before and after the attack. He tells him he wants the people who did this to suffer, and since he saved his son's life, he's asking for his help. Juan says he's thankful he saved his son's life, but this is something he would go to jail for. The doctor tells him he could go to jail for other things, too, and claims to know what goes on in the house. He says social services will take their boy away if he talks. Juan says he has big balls, and takes a swig of liquor before telling the doctor he'll keep his mouth shut because no one touches his boy. The doctor tells him he must understand it's impossible for a parent to do nothing. The doctor watches his daughter have an argument with Andrea. At home, he knocks on her door and sees she's trying to call someone. He asks her if it was Andrea standing with her, and she accuses him of spying on her. She says she doesn't know anything about the attack on her brother, but doesn't offer an explanation about why she's dating his ex-girlfriend. Jamie meets up with Juan, and Juan asks what he wants him to do to the attacker, Raul. He says just a hard beating, like what he did to his son. He gives him all the information he needs to find the nightclub owner's son. Juan gives him something else, and tells him to keep his cell phone handy so he knows when the job is done. He loads the gun he received, and hides it away behind the running shoes his son wore. He stands on the roof of the hospital for a smoke and calls an unavailable number. Against Juan's wishes, he returns to his home to find that his wife doesn't know where he is and he didn't come home last night. He continues his drive, and when he stops the car, the nightclub owner gets in the passenger seat. He is stunned and terrified to see him. He wonders what happened to Juan, and what will happen to him. Every movement the man makes scares him, until he puts a package on his dashboard. Jamie is frightened to death, but believes he's in the clear when the guy leaves his car, but he returns, and pulls out a hammer to smash the doctor's right hand for targeting his son. After he's stitched up, he's Standing with his wife as they watch nurses move Marcos's limbs around for him, he tells her he can't go through this alone, but she just walks away, disappointed in him for getting into trouble. He goes for a run and is plagued by visions of his son being beaten. He gets out the gun, but finds it difficult to hold in his injured hand. He pulls out an engraved scalpel, and takes some drugs on the way to the nightclub. He crawls through the sea of young people, getting a few odd glances. He finally sees Raul and follows him to the bathroom, pausing only for a moment to gather up the courage to enter. He finds him and pulls out his weapon while he waits. When Raul comes out, he charges at him and attacks him in the bathroom stall. There is only silence as he realizes the magnitude of what he's done. He only tries to stop Raul's artery from pouring blood for a few moments. An employee enters to bang on the stalls and announce that it's closing time. He crawls out from under the stall door, and is clearly seen on video surveillance leaving the nightclub looking very suspicious. He cleans up at home and rewraps his hand. He finds Andrea with Sarah, and she says he should see something, presenting Marcos's missing cell phone. Andrea is crying as he watches a video. Marcos catches up with Andrea as she leaves the club, and he offers her a ride home. She agrees, and Marcos tries to convince her they should get back together. A friend of theirs gets in the back seat and says he's rooting for them to work things out, but says he thought he saw her with the nightclub owner's son. The three of them do lines of coke, and Marcos and his friend pressure Andrea to take him back, because he loves her. She has had enough, but he begs her to just answer one question, so he can drop it forever. He asks if she was sleeping with Raul while they were together, and Andrea refuses to answer. She tries to get out of the car, but he locks her in, and asks her again. She is terrified, and starts hitting the windshield and screaming for help. Another friend of theirs arrives to watch Marcos sexually assault her. Jamie drops the phone, and takes a moment to gather himself, but returns to the room to tell the girls that his son's actions only proved that he loved Andrea, and the attack against him wasn't justifiable. Andrea is extremely disturbed that he took his son's side, and she tries to leave with his cell phone and the evidence against him. He grabs her by the hair and takes the phone, then he shoves her out of the house. He stares at his broken and unconscious son. He kisses him on the forehead, and plays the video of his sexual attack before deleting it off Andrea's phone, proving once again that he would choose to protect his son, even if it was wrong.